Hey, Mission Continuous family, how you doing? My name is Kenric Lynn, and today I'm going to be talking to you about ways to help you lead through adversity. With everything going on with the pandemic and the coronavirus, uh, I thought it'd be a good idea to come on and talk about adversity and crisis and just give you a few tips on how you can help prepare yourself and cope with changes that are going on in the world. And if you consider yourself a leader, you definitely want to be able to stand tall in front of the people who look up to you or the people that you influence. And so, in a way to help you with that, I just want to give you 5 tips that I think are very valuable. And I hope you find them valuable, and I hope you find ways to use them for yourself. Right? Before I get started, I just want to tell you a little bit about me. I'm originally from Dallas, Texas. I actually graduated high school in 1990. It sounds like a long time ago. But I joined the Army in 1991, and after 23 years of service, I actually retired back in 2006. Oh, wow, 2014. It's been about 6 years since I retired, and it just doesn't seems like yesterday when I was standing there in my boots with no stripes on my collar and getting my head shaved and all that good stuff that you all probably remember too from basic training and everything. But after I retired, I actually discovered the mission continues. Now, I can't even tell you how I did that. Maybe just do a Google search because I've always liked to volunteer and give my time back to the community. But I found something interesting about the mission continues. I like the mission. I like the idea of helping veterans continue to serve in their communities. And so I applied to become a fellowship alum. And I did my fellowship at the Scott Air Force Base Youth Center, which is where I live now. I live just outside the base. And I spent most days, I got to be a pseudo PE teacher. I got to cut limbs because they didn't actually pay anybody to take care of the grounds. I pulled weeds. I serviced AEDs because I was CPR certified. And basically, I just did anything that I could do just to help out the organization. Well, that was 2014. And between then and now, I really hadn't done a whole lot with the mission continues up until recently, where I actually applied to become part of the SLC. And so I'm happy to say that I was accepted into the SLC cohort 3. And so I'm excited about that. Looking forward to my first trip coming up in August. And I'm just hoping that things are a little better than they are now as far as travel goes. But I would enjoy being able to have my whole row to myself on the plane too. So I'm not complaining. All right. And so, again, I'm married. I do have 6 children. I actually have 3 grandchildren with one more on the way in August. So I'm looking forward to that. When you have kids and they have kids, as a grandparent, sometimes you feel like you get to recreate the good times. Especially if you've had teenagers. You miss out on the days when your kids you could just bounce them off your knee, versus the time you just wanted to bounce them out of the house. All right. But seriously, I love all my children, and I'm looking forward to the next addition to the family. I have been married now for, wow, what year is this? 2020, 20 years. My wife actually works as an information security professional. And so right now, I kind of well, it's not allow, I position myself to let her do the things she needs to do for her career since she spent so many years following me around. And, I'm loving every day of retirement. So some of you that are retired, you know what I'm talking about. I always call it the good life, right? Now, why I chose this lesson. To answer that question, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story. Something that happened to me. Like a lot of you, you remember September 11th. You probably remember exactly where you were and what you were doing. Well, September 11th, I was actually stationed in Fort Meade, Maryland. And I was the site NCOIC there. I still consider myself a newly promoted E6. I think I was an E6 for maybe a year. And the billet I was in was actually for an E7 or Sergeant First Class. And so, rightfully so, the organization was actually looking to try to fill the billet as it was written with the right rank. And so they reached out to one of our sister organizations who happened to be top heavy when it came to non-commissioned officers. And so they invited that gentleman down. And we had met a couple of times. And in all fairness, he was a great guy. I love the guy. I hadn't seen him in a while, but if I saw him now, I love him now just as much as I did then. Well, on September 11th, when everything kind of hit the fan, my counterpart decided that he needed to take action. And take action he did, which means he made a lot of decisions that didn't sit well with the command. But most importantly, he did not make the people on the site feel comfortable. I had a couple of the soldiers on the site come up to me and actually tell me that they made him feel more uncomfortable than what was going on not too far down the road. And they mentioned that I was staying calm and that they trusted me. And needless to say, he and I butted heads that day, and the command found out about what happened between me and him, and they actually asked him to return back to his old unit, even in the time of this crisis, in the time of this adversity, because they believed that the one thing they could not have is the perceived leaders to be falling apart, so to speak, or to not remaining calm and not staying the rock that everybody needed them to be. And so I thought about that. I thought about the pandemic and some of the things that I've seen, some of the things that I've witnessed, maybe some of the same things you've witnessed from people that you consider to be leaders to you, or leaders of other organizations, or just people in the public eye. And so I thought this would be a good time to give you some ways to help you lead better through adversity. All right. Now, I want to cover a couple of definitions first before I get started. So when I say leadership, what I mean is influence. I know a lot of different people have different definitions for leadership, but I want you to understand for the course of this lesson, when I say leadership, I mean influence. Also, when I say adversity, I'm talking about difficulties. And if I say crisis, I'm actually talking about times of intense difficulty, trouble, or danger. All right? Now, the 5 tips to help you lead through adversity. And the first tip I want to share with you just simply states, imagine good outcomes. And why do I say that? You know, we're all benefactors and victims of the stories we create in our mind. All right? So it's important for us not to be sucked in by feelings of doom and gloom. You're going to be under a lot of stress a lot of times when adversity hits. And the last thing you want to do is to take your imagination and let it run wild about all the bad things that are going to happen. Now, it's okay to acknowledge how you feel, but you don't want to dwell on it, right? And the reason why it's important is because we actually lead through the stories that we tell ourselves. And so in times of adversity, we're actually going to lead through the stories that we tell ourselves about the adversity or the crisis. And we're going to project that in everything that we do, right? But I want you to remember one key thing. Maybe this will help you, right? You never know the whole story, right? No matter how many facts, no matter how much information you have, and again, you definitely cannot predict the future. You don't know the whole story. So if there's a chance that you could be wrong about how you feel about the future, there's also a chance that you could be right. And if you're going to be leading people and people are going to consider you their leader, then you want to be able to harness the power of your imagination and actually imagine good outcomes. You want to use that as a almost like a superpower. And I don't mean just be overly rosy about everything, but as you're looking at things for what they are, always look at possibilities of what they can be and then work to try to make those good outcomes happen. Right? The next tip number 2, is know your priorities and then leader shift. And when I say know your priorities, what I mean is you need to know what was important to you before the crisis happened. So you need to know things like, what was your mission? I believe everybody in every organization needs to know what their mission is, right? I always challenge people when I'm doing training is I asked them, when was the last time you went to your organization's about page? When was the last time you actually read what the customers read or the people that you serve read, right? So you need to know what your critical tasks were, right? You need to know who your most important customers were. What are your areas of strength and or your needs improvement areas? These are all things that you need to know because you're going to have to learn how to take what you have, these strengths and all this information, and you're going to have to craft a plan and a strategy to move forward through the adversity. You don't want to be reinventing the wheel when it comes to what's important to you already. You want to be asking yourself, all right, if this is the main thing, how can I best apply risk management, right? What kind of risk assessment can I make? What is the risk assessment? Okay. How can I mitigate things so that I can still perform and accomplish my mission to the best extent possible, right? Again, how do I take what I know about me or my business and my organization and then leadership it? And leadership is basically just an ability and willingness to make a leadership change that will positively enhance organizational and personal growth or influence, again, good outcomes. So this means it's going to require you to have to adapt, right? And adapting is just simply the ability to change or be changed under any and all circumstances, right? It's also going to require you to overcome, which is just succeeding in dealing with the difficulty. If you went to basic training, especially in the Army, adapt and overcome was something that you probably learned on day 2, right? This too shall pass. The only good day was yesterday, right? But you definitely want to be able to adapt and overcome, right? And so something else I want to talk about here in this section, under this tip about knowing your priorities, is stress management, right? Because we always want to make sure at any given time that we're managing stress, whether it's in peacetime, whether it's in times of crisis, whether it's in time of adversity, because stress impacts us all differently. And so I think as leaders, it's important not only to model this, but to encourage others to adopt what I'm about to share with you when it comes to stress management. Now, when I've learned about stress management, that there are 3 simple pillars to stress management, right? They're just proper rest, proper nutrition, proper exercise. I'll say that again. Proper rest, proper nutrition, proper exercise. And sometimes under times of extreme difficulty, it could just simply be adequate rest, or am I getting rest at all, right? Or another word could just be consistent, right? Right? Maybe I just need to make sure I get those 4 hours. I've been to the field a lot, and sometimes 4 hours of sleep is all you could get, over the course of a week or 2 weeks. 4 hours a night. But I wanted to make sure I got those 4 hours a night, right? I wanted to be consistent. I wanted to be consistent about my exercise. I wanted to be consistent about my nutrition, right? And I wanted to move that as close to however I define proper as possible, right? But I think this is something that all leaders need to embrace. I think it's something all leaders need to encourage for the people that look to them, right? For how can I stay calm, cool, and collected? Well, proper rest, proper nutrition, proper exercise, right? Tip number 3, trust your decisions knowing you will fail your way forward. Now, I mentioned earlier that you cannot predict the future. There are just way too many variables at play. Right? When you think about it, you can only control yourself. So in doing that, one of the things that you have to learn how to do, and this sounds foreign to a lot of people, especially the high achievers, is that you have to learn to detach yourself from the outcome. I don't mean you don't continue to work and drive towards creating outcomes that you want, but you have to stop attaching yourself to that outcome. You have to stop self-identifying yourself to that outcome, good or bad, right? Because if you can only control you, and you understand that there are multiple variables at play, regardless of how much of that you influence, when you get to the end, things happen based on a combination of things, not just you. So if things don't go well, things didn't go well because of a combination of things, typically, not just because it was you, right? And so when we're talking about failing forward, Right? We're talking about the fact that people, we make mistakes. Just like airplanes. An airplane will take off from here near where I live, from St. Louis, and fly to Dallas, Texas. It doesn't fly in a straight line. Theoretically, it is failing its way forward. It's always off course until it lands. So it's always failing itself forward. And so what I'm going to share with you now is just a 5-step process to help you understand and maybe apply it to some of your situations, just to help you fail forward and understand that failing forward is the way all success happens, because nothing's perfect, right? And that 5-step process is simply test, fail, learn, improve, and re-enter. I'll say that again. Test, fail, learn, improve, and re-enter, right? You develop your plan. You go out there and you take action, right? Something happens. You get a result. Maybe you didn't get the result that you wanted. You ask yourself, well, what went wrong? What went right? Right? Most of you are familiar with the AAR process, right? What was supposed to happen? What did happen? What went wrong? What went right? And what can we do to make it better in the future? Right? Same concept. Test, fail, learn, improve, make it better, and then get back out there, right? But you wouldn't be able to do this if you weren't able to manage the stress of the situation, because you let the stress of the situation get you down. And this is why it's important, again, to stay focused, also managing stress, using those 3 ways that I gave you earlier: proper nutrition, proper rest, proper exercise, right? So that you can go through this process of failing forward, not self-identifying with the end result, right? Because you want to be able to stand there when other people look at you when things are not going right. And you want to be able to say, hey, you know what? Things didn't go our way. Let's sit down and talk about it. Let's improve it. And let's get back out there, right? So tip number 4, embrace the needs of the people in your span of care. Now, who's in your span of care? Do you know what span of care means? Now, when I say span of care, I'm talking about every life. Every life you have an opportunity to touch, whether directly or indirectly, right? It's about taking responsibility and holding yourself accountable for the impact you can have on other people, right? I believe this is where leadership thrives. And this goes back to what I said earlier about the definition of leadership being influence, because everybody influences someone, right? And if you're leading people, at the end of the day, you want to influence their behavior in such a way that you can get out and accomplish the mission of your team, or your organization, or even yourself, right? Because the first person you need to learn how to lead is yourself, right? And so how am I influencing myself? Because everything that you do becomes input for yourself. Everything you say, comes out of your mouth, goes into your 2 ears. And a great man, great speaker, who passed away a few years ago, Zig Ziglar, said you're what you are and where you are because of everything that has gone into your mind. Well, this is true when you're leading. And so now we're back to the first tip about the stories that you tell yourself, right? So you have to work on your mindset, right? So that you can influence people in a way that shows that you not only care about them, but you care about what happens to them, and that you care about everyone else, and that you care about your impact on them, right? So you also need to know that when people, especially in times of adversity, when people are confronted with something new, it's going to take time for them to process it in their own way, right? And one of the things you can do as a leader is to listen with empathy, right? And by listening with empathy too, that also brings in what I call the platinum rule. Now, most of you are familiar with the golden rule, which is treat everyone the way you want to be treated. Well, I challenge you to take that a step further, right? Put it in the perspective of other people. I want you to treat everyone the way they want to be treated, right? And so the only way for you to know how someone wants to be treated is to get to know them. You have to connect with them, right? John Maxwell wrote a book a few years ago. It's called Everyone Communicates, but Few Connect, right? Empathy is about connection, right? Treating people the way they want to be treated is about connection. So there's three things that I want you to remember too, to go along with that, that I think are very important when it comes to leading people, and showing people that you can be a value added asset to them, right? Now, I believe this applies no matter whether you're leading people, whether you're a parent with children, whether it's your friends or any other relationship that you're in that you deem important to you, right? Now, there are three things that everyone wants to know, especially from the leaders, but also from people they know, like, and love, right? And these three things are: do you care for me? Can you help me? And can I trust you? Again, do you care for me? Can you help me? And can I trust you? I often think about teenagers, right? At some point in time, teenagers typically gravitate towards their friends. The words of their friends tend to have more value than the words of their parents for whatever reason, right? But I think it's linked to this, that for whatever reason, they start to look at their friends as somebody that they can trust more, someone that can help them more, and someone that actually cares about them, right? So again, do you care for me? Can you help me? Can I trust you? All right. So tip number 5, the last tip, this is probably one of my favorites. It's take a deep breath, let it out, and Charlie Mike, right? Leadership takes courage. And courage is not the absence of fear, right? It's being able to Charlie Mike with your hands sweating, knees knocking, and teeth chattering. And yet you're still able to jump. And jump and build your wings on the way down if you have to. But in the times of crisis, the last thing you want to be perceived of as a leader is someone afraid to take action, right? So you have to stay in the moment, okay? And by staying in the moment, you can actually see things for what they are better. Because I was listening to something earlier today that talked about suffering. And then typically suffering is a result of thoughts about something in the past that happened before, or thoughts about something in the future that has not happened yet. And so if you allow your thoughts to gravitate towards things that have already happened that you can't change, and things that are in the future that have not happened yet that you cannot guarantee, then you won't be able to focus in the moment. And when you're leading, this is where people need you the most. They need you to be present in the moment. So again, take a deep breath, let it out, and Charlie Mike, right? So there you have it. I've just given you 5 tips on how to help you lead through adversity. All right. We talked about ways to imagine good outcomes. We talked about knowing your priorities, and then leader shifting. We talked about trusting your decisions, knowing you will fail your way forward. We talked about embracing the needs of the people in your span of care. And then we talked about taking a deep breath, letting it in, and Charlie Mike. All right. So I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. Again, thank you for your time, and I look forward to getting to know some of you a little better in the future. You know, as we start to work towards more solutions and how we're going to get life back to a way so we can start interacting again. You know, I love the virtual part, but there's nothing like the energy that comes from being in a room with people. I remember my first service project. There's nothing like the energy of just being around people working on a common goal, looking across, seeing people happy and smiling and everything, and you know, sweating together and seeing, you know, these friends in the foxhole. So I'm really looking forward to the day we can do that again. And for those of you that I've have yet to meet, I'm really looking forward to it. Again, thanks for your time. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Take care.